Bitcoin White Paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshin@gmx.com. Refer to www.bitcoin.org for the original document. Bought to you by the Empire. Abstract. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would enable online payments to be transmitted directly from one party to another without the need for a financial institution. Digital signatures play a role in addressing this challenge, but their effectiveness diminishes if a trusted third party remains necessary to prevent double spending. In response, we present a solution to the double spending issue leveraging a peer-to-peer network. This network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, creating an immutable record. This record can only be altered by reperforming the proof of work. The longest chain not only establishes the sequence of events witnessed, but also confirms its origin from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as a majority of CPU power is in the hands of non-colluding nodes, they will produce the longest chain, effectively thwarting attackers. The network itself operates with minimal structure. Messages are disseminated on a best effort basis, and nodes have the freedom to join or leave the network at their discretion, recognizing the longest proof of work chain as a testament to events during their absence. Introduction. Commerce on the Internet heavily relies on financial institutions as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. However, this model still has inherent weaknesses. Transactions are not completely irreversible, as financial institutions mediate disputes, increasing costs and limiting transaction sizes. The lack of non-reversible payments for non-reversible services increases the need for trust, leading to hassles for merchants and acceptance of fraud. While physical currency works for in-person transactions, no mechanism exists for payments over communication channels without a trusted party. An electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof rather than trust is necessary. Such a system would enable direct transactions between any two willing parties without relying on a trusted third party. Transactions computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and escrow mechanisms could safeguard buyers. This paper proposes a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to establish computational proof of transaction chronology. The system remains secure as long as honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. Transactions. We define an electronic coin as a chain of digital signatures. Each owner transfers the coin to the next by digitally signing a hash of the previous transaction and the public key of the next owner and adding these to the end of the coin. A payee can verify the signatures to verify the chain of ownership. The problem, of course, is that the payee can't verify that one of the owners did not double spend the coin. A common solution is to introduce a trusted central authority, or mint, that checks every transaction for double spending. After each transaction, the coin must be returned to the mint to issue a new coin, and only coins issued directly from the mint are trusted not to be double spent. The problem with this solution is that the fate of the entire money system depends on the company running the mint, with every transaction having to go through them, just like a bank. We need a way for the payee to know that the previous owners did not sign any earlier transactions. For our purposes, the earliest transaction is the one that counts, so we don't care about later attempts to double spend. The only way to confirm the absence of a transaction is to be aware of all transactions. In the mint-based model, the mint was aware of all transactions and decided which arrived first. To accomplish this without a trusted party, transactions must be publicly announced, and we need a system for participants to agree on a single history of the order in which they were received. The payee needs proof that at the time of each transaction, the majority of nodes agreed it was the first received. Timestamp server. The solution we propose begins with a timestamp server. A timestamp server works by taking a hash of a block of items to be timestamped and widely publishing the hash, such as in a newspaper or Usenet post. The timestamp proves that the data must have existed at the time, obviously, in order to get into the hash. Each timestamp includes the previous timestamp in its hash, forming a chain, with each additional timestamp reinforcing the ones before it. Proof of work. To implement a distributed timestamp server on a peer-to-peer basis, we will need to use a proof-of-work system similar to Adam-Back's Hashcash, rather than newspaper or Usenet posts. The proof-of-work involves scanning for a value that, when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with a number of 0 bits. The average work required is exponential in the number of 0 bits required, and can be verified by executing a single hash. For our timestamp network, we implement the proof-of-work by incrementing a nonce in the block until a value is found that gives the block's hash the required 0 bits. Once the CPU effort has been expended to make it satisfy the proof-of-work, the block cannot be changed without redoing the work. As later blocks are chained after it, the work to change the block would include redoing all the blocks after it. The proof-of-work also addresses the issue of determining representation in majority decision-making. If the majority were based on a one IP address one vote system, it could be undermined by anyone capable of allocating numerous IPs. Proof-of-work essentially establishes a one CPU one vote system. The majority decision is represented by the longest chain, which reflects the highest proof-of-work effort invested in it. If a majority of CPU power is controlled by honest nodes, the honest chain will grow the fastest and surpass any competing chains. To alter a past block, an attacker would need to redo the proof-of-work of that block and all subsequent blocks, then catch up with and surpass the work of the honest nodes. We will demonstrate later that the likelihood of a slower attacker catching up diminishes exponentially as subsequent blocks are added. To account for increasing hardware speed and fluctuating interest in running nodes over time, the proof-of-work difficulty is determined by a moving average targeting an average number of blocks per hour. If blocks are generated too quickly, the difficulty increases. Network. The operation of the network involves the following steps. Broadcasting new transactions. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes within the network. Collecting transactions. Each node gathers new transactions into a block. Proof of work. Each node endeavors to find a challenging proof of work for its block. Broadcasting blocks. Upon discovering a proof of work, a node broadcasts the block to all other nodes. Block validation. Nodes only accept a block if all transactions within it are valid and have not been previously spent. Extending the chain. Nodes indicate their acceptance of a block by working on creating the next block in the chain, using the hash of the accepted block as the previous hash. Nodes consistently regard the longest chain as the correct one and continue to extend it. In situations where two nodes broadcast different versions of the next block simultaneously, some nodes may receive one version before the other. In such cases, they begin working on the first one received, but preserve the alternative branch in case it becomes longer. The tie between branches is resolved when the next proof of work is discovered, and one branch becomes longer. Nodes previously working on the shorter branch then switch to the longer one. New transaction broadcasts do not necessarily need to reach every node in the network. As long as they reach a substantial number of nodes, they will eventually be incorporated into a block. Additionally, block broadcasts are resilient to dropped messages. If a node misses a block, it will request it upon receiving the subsequent block, ensuring no transactions are missed. Incentive. Traditionally, the first transaction within a block is a unique transaction that initiates a new coin owned by the creator of the block. This setup provides an incentive for nodes to maintain the network and establishes a method for initially dispersing coins into circulation, as there is no centralized authority to issue them. The continual addition of a consistent amount of new coins mirrors the process of gold miners investing resources to introduce gold into circulation. In our context, this investment involves CPU time and electricity. Additionally, the incentive can be supplemented with transaction fees. If the output value of a transaction is less than its input value, the difference serves as a transaction fee, which is added to the incentive value of the block containing the transaction. Once a predetermined number of coins have entered circulation, the incentive can gradually transition entirely to transaction fees, rendering the system completely inflation-free. Furthermore, the incentive mechanism may foster honesty among nodes. If a malicious attacker accumulates more CPU power than all the honest nodes combined, they face a choice between using it to defraud individuals by reclaiming their payments or utilizing it to generate new coins. It is presumed that the attacker would find it more advantageous to abide by the rules, which favor them with more new coins than all others combined, rather than jeopardizing the system and the legitimacy of their own wealth. Reclaiming disk space. Once the most recent transaction in a coin becomes buried beneath a sufficient number of blocks, the spent transactions preceding it can be discarded to conserve disk space. To facilitate this process without compromising the block's hash, transactions are hashed in a Merkle tree, with only the root included in the block's hash. Consequently, old blocks can be condensed by truncating branches of the tree, eliminating the need to store interior hashes. A block header with no transactions would typically be about 80 bytes in size. Assuming blocks are generated every 10 minutes, the calculation would be as follows. 80 bytes times 6 times 24 times 365 equals 4.2 megabytes per year. Given that computer systems commonly sold with 2 gigabytes of RAM as of 2008, and with Moore's law predicting current growth of approximately 1.2 gigabytes per year, storage should not pose a problem even if the block headers must be kept in memory. Simplified payment verification. It is indeed possible to verify payments without running a full network node. A user simply needs to maintain a copy of the block headers of the longest proof of work chain. This information can be obtained by querying network nodes until the user is convinced they have the longest chain. Additionally, the user needs to obtain the Merkle branch linking the transaction to the block in which it's timestamped. Although the user cannot directly check the transaction, by linking it to a specific place in the chain, they can observe that a network node has accepted it. Subsequent blocks added after it further confirm the network's acceptance of the transaction. Therefore, the verification process is reliable as long as honest nodes control the network. However, it becomes more vulnerable if the network is overpowered by an attacker. While network nodes can independently verify transactions, the simplified method may be deceived by an attacker's fabricated transactions, as long as the attacker can overpower the network. One strategy to mitigate this risk is to accept alerts from network nodes when they detect an invalid block. This prompts the user's software to download the full block and alerted transactions to confirm the inconsistency. Businesses that receive frequent payments may still prefer to run their own nodes for increased security and faster verification processes. Combining and splitting value. Although it would be feasible to handle coins individually, it would be impractical to create a separate transaction for every cent in a transfer. To enable the splitting and combining of value, transactions contain multiple inputs and outputs. Typically, there will either be a single input from a larger previous transaction or multiple inputs combining smaller amounts. Moreover, there are at most two outputs, one for the payment and another to return the change, if any, back to the sender. It's important to note that fan-out where a transaction depends on several transactions, and those transactions depend on many more, is not an issue here. There is never a need to extract a complete standalone copy of a transaction's history. Privacy. The traditional banking model achieves a certain level of privacy by restricting access to information to the involved parties and the trusted third party. However, the need to publicly announce all transactions eliminates this approach. Nonetheless, privacy can still be preserved by interrupting the flow of information elsewhere, by maintaining the anonymity of public keys. While the public can observe that an amount is being sent from one party to another, there is no information connecting the transaction to any specific individual. This concept resembles the information disclosed by stock exchanges, where the time and size of individual trades known as the tape are made public without disclosing the parties involved. To enhance privacy further, a new key pair should be utilized for each transaction to prevent them from being linked to a common owner. However, some level of linking remains unavoidable with multi-input transactions, as they inherently reveal that their inputs were owned by the same individual. The concern is that if the owner of one key is exposed, linking could unveil other transactions associated with the same owner. Calculation. We examine the situation where an attacker endeavors to generate an alternative chain more rapidly than the honest chain. Even if successful, this endeavor does not grant the ability to make arbitrary alterations to the system, such as creating value from nothing or appropriating funds that did not belong to the attacker. Invalid transactions will not be accepted by nodes as payment, and blocks containing such transactions will never be accepted by honest nodes. Consequently, an attacker's sole option is to attempt to alter one of their own transactions to reclaim money they recently expended. The contest between the honest chain and an attacker's chain can be likened to a binomial random walk. In this context, the success event is the honest chain extending by one block, thereby increasing its lead by +1, while the failure event is the attacker's chain extending by one block, narrowing the gap by -1. The likelihood of an attacker catching up from a given deficit mirrors a gambler's ruin problem. Let's suppose a gambler with unlimited credit starts with a deficit and engages in potentially an infinite number of trials to reach a break-even point. We can compute the probability of the gambler ever reaching break-even, or equivalently, the probability of an attacker ever catching up with the honest chain, as follows. P equals probability an honest node finds the next block. Q equals probability the attacker finds the next block. QZ equals probability the attacker will ever catch up from Z blocks behind. Refer to the equation on the screen for more accurate calculations. Given our assumption that P greater than Q, the probability diminishes exponentially as the number of blocks the attacker must catch up with increases. With unfavorable odds, unless he makes an auspicious leap forward early on, his prospects dwindle to near impossibility as he falls further behind. Now let's contemplate how long the recipient of a new transaction must wait before becoming reasonably assured that the sender cannot alter the transaction. Let's assume the sender is an attacker aiming to deceive the recipient into believing he has been paid for a period, then switching the payment back to himself after some time elapses. Although the receiver will be notified when this occurs, the sender anticipates that the notification will come too late. To prevent the sender from premeditating a chain of blocks in advance by continuously working on it until he achieves a significant lead, the recipient generates a new key pair and provides the public key to the sender just before signing. Upon sending the transaction, the dishonest sender covertly commences work on a parallel chain containing an alternate version of his transaction. The recipient waits until the transaction is included in a block and Z blocks have been linked afterward. Although he is unaware of the precise progress the attacker has made, assuming that the honest blocks took the average expected time per block, the attacker's potential advancement will follow a Poisson distribution with an expected value of. Refer to the equation presented. To simplify the computation and avoid summing the infinite tail of the distribution, we rearrange the equation as displayed on the screen. Conclusion. The proposed system presents a groundbreaking approach to electronic transactions by eliminating the need for trust. Beginning with the concept of digital signatures to establish ownership control, we recognize the critical issue of preventing double spending. Our solution involved the creation of a peer-to-peer network leveraging proof of work to create an immutable public ledger of transactions, rendering it computationally infeasible for malicious actors to alter the history when honest nodes dominate the network's computational power. The network's strength lies in its simple and decentralized structure. Nodes operate independently with minimal coordination, and their identities are not essential since messages are broadcasted without specific routing requirements. Nodes can freely enter and exit the network, acknowledging the proof-of-work chain as a reliable record of events during their absence. Through their CPU power, nodes participate in consensus, endorsing valid blocks by extending them and rejecting invalid ones by refusing to engage with them. This consensus mechanism allows for the enforcement of necessary rules and incentives within the network. References 1W Die B-Money http://www.vitai.com/bmoney TXT 1998 2H Mashes Excess Avila and J.J. Quisquater Design of a secure timestamping service with minimal trust requirements in 20th Symposium on Information Theory in the Benelux, May 1999. 3S Haber, W.S. Stornetta, How to Timestamp a Digital Document, in Journal of Cryptology, Vol. 3 No. 2, pages 99 to 111, 1991. 4D Bayer, S. Haber, W.S. Stornetta, Improving the Efficiency and Reliability of Digital Timestamping. In Sequences 2, Methods in Communication, Security and Computer Science, pages 329 to 334, 1993. 5S. Haber, W.S. Stornetta, Secure Names for Bit Strings, in Proceedings of the 4th ACM Conference. On Computer and Communication Security, pages 28 to 35, April 1997. 6A. Back, Hashcash, A Denial of Service Countermeasure. http://www.hashcash.org/papers/hashcash PDF 2002. 7 R.C. Merkel, Protocols for Public Key Cryptosystems, in Prague. 1980 Symposium on Security and Privacy, IEEE Computer Society, pages 122 to 133, April 1980. 8 W. Feller, An Introduction to Probability Theory and Its Applications, 1957. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to drop a comment below and join the conversation.